recording. Although I don't see. There we go. Cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello. Thank you so much for checking this out. I genuinely appreciate your company as per always. Welcome to another Monday night together, where tonight we're going to do something a little different. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how sausage gets made, and we're going to cover some kind of broad-reaching topics. Some kind of stuff that goes from pre-writing, like before you start drafting, while you're drafting, and then ultimately right before you go publish, either query it and traditionally publish or self-publish it. This is one of those things, this is one of the topics that can stretch across the breadth of the entirety of whatever you're writing. Tonight, I want to talk about how to organize your writing and what exactly it can do for you and what benefits it has for you when it comes time to either try and get published, or if you're one of those people who are going to take on everything yourself and kind of DIY the whole thing, how organization early on can help you get a strong readership after the fact. So I think that's maybe the first point I want to make before we really go anywhere. There's no downside to organizing beyond it just taking more time, requiring some more thought, and generally not hastening you forward dramatically. This is not something that's going to expedite any processes. This is something that's going to make them maybe take a little bit longer, maybe require a little bit more effort on your part, but it will be worth it. In fact, it will demonstrably be worth it as we go forward. The important thing here, hello. So far, so good. It seems that the previous Twitch hiccups have been resolved, in the sense at least that I'm getting not a million error messages. So that's always nice. And it seems like for whatever reason, the chat is not defaulting into emote mode, which I didn't even know was a thing. I think after fiddling with some settings and doing some doodads, we're up and running. So if you're there, let me know. Like, just drop a note, say hi. So at least I know that I'm not entirely talking to a wall. I see people, but it's more a matter of like, oh, good, you can see me. How delightful. I always get worried about these things. Hello, hi. It's nice to see you all. As I said, I don't know when you walked in. As you said, tonight I'm covering organization. We're going to cover organization in 3 stages. And I'm going to do this. On one hand, I want to do this. Just wanted to let you know I've been listening to your past recordings. Welcome back. And I wanted to catch your live stream. Thank you so much. It is wonderful to have you here. Monday night live streams, different than Wednesdays. Monday has a soundtrack. And it's usually a much less clicky, oh my God, I'm just kind of doing whatever vibe. It's a little bit more, I'm just going to talk into this microphone for a while. And if you have questions, fire away. But Mondays usually have a topic. Tonight's topic is organizing. And, you know, I really first, when I came up with this idea over the weekend, I really wanted to talk about, like, really concretely, like, hey, here's how to outline, period. Just outline things. And in talking to a few people, I was struck by how remarkably boring other humans might find it, because I think outlining is, like, cool, and I think anybody who can outline effectively on some level seems often more pleasant, attractive, and better qualified to do things. Like, I can trust somebody who outlines because they at least don't rush in headlong. I'm aware that it's a fairly controversial statement in the hashtag writing community. But you know what? I'm willing to say that if you're willing to take the extra, I don't know, however long, 5, 10, 20 minutes to write down your idea and have it make sense before you shoot it out of your fingers onto the page, you're probably going to do better in the world than somebody who's just going to kind of hope and pray that everything works out in the end like this is some kind of Hallmark movie. Because organization is not the boogeyman. It is not the monster lurking under the bed, nor is it like a total drag. outlining is more important but less sexy. No, I swear to you, I'm going to make outlining sexy in the next 2 hours. I will make outlining sexy. I will make it all. Where's my romantic sexy jam playlist? Because I'll just straight do it. I don't care. Where's like the ooh playlist, like the hey playlist? Because I'll get into it. Here we go. Let's see. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're gonna go sexy for outlining, because that's just part of what we're talking about. Because whether we're talking about Roman numerals, or whether we're talking about just bullet points, or whether we're talking about, like just a series of post-it notes on a vertical straight line or something, whatever you're doing, it's absolutely going to help. And I wanted to originally just cover like, hey, here's how you set stuff up. And it was pointed out to me that if you go back and you go back through like the plot and the character lessons, I walked through that on a scene by scene level. So I'm assuming some level of familiarity. And if you're not totally aware of that, I'll touch on it briefly here. But by and large, I want to do more than just cover this is how you make a scene. This is how you make 2 scenes. I want to show this in context. So part of this is going to cover the nuts and bolts of organizing your ideas. No matter what your idea is, no matter what your genre is, I'm going to try and draw, because one of the comments I got last week was, hey, you should try to draw on multiple different genres to show how this stuff comes together. And you know what? I'm all for it. So let's grab some multiple genres. Let's come up with some different examples and see what we can do. So part of this is going to be the writing, the organizing you do before you really get into the throes of writing. So it's the pre-draft stuff, it's the early draft stuff, it's the decision making before you really get going. The next third of this is going to be the organizing you do while you're writing. And I don't really want to freak you out, but everybody in publishing knows that just like writers swear up and down they don't edit a little as they write, everybody knows they do, and everybody knows that over the course of writing, sometimes you find yourself having to reposition scenes and change some ideas, and the stuff that's in the outline doesn't necessarily 1,000,000,000% make its way exactly verbatim into the text. And you know what? That's fine. But there is something to be said about organizing that writing while you're writing. So we're going to touch on that stuff too. In the last third, I want to talk about organizing your writing after you've finished your draft. Whether it's your first draft or your 6th draft, or it's the draft where you're like, yeah, I'm going to go query, or yeah, I'm going to go press the publish button and go forward with this. Post-draft kind of publication level organization, I think that's a really under-discussed part of writing. I think that's a thing that writers definitely need to know about. And people in my side of the publisher, editor, curtain, line? What metaphor am I going for here? People on my side of the fence. Fence. That's the thing I'm going for. People on my side of the fence get real tight-lipped about it because for some reason, those assholes want there to be some kind of great mystery or some kind of like gatekeeping shit to things. And I can't stand any of that. So we're not going to do any of that. So I'm just going to tell you what they're straight up looking for. But first, straight up, we're just going to start with organizing your writing before you've really gotten started. And this comes down to a couple really straightforward tools, like super straightforward tools that you're possibly going to hear me talk about and go, what do you mean it's that simple? Because it is that simple. And anybody who wants to make it more complicated, anybody who wants to inflate it and bring in all this extra stuff, I mean, I guess technically you can. But at the same time, like, if you're going out of your way to make this really complicated, you're either one, selling something, or two, you're fundamentally missing the point. Because the point of organizing, whatever it is we're organizing, whether it's characters or scenes or arcs or acts or books or series or whatever, the fundamental thing you're doing when you're organizing is you're trying to streamline your ideas so that when you go to the next stages in production, thinking to writing to revising, etc., you're making it easier along the way. The more organization you can do up front, the more organizing you can do and the more declarative decision making you can do up front, the easier it's going to be later. Now, we need to have a little moment here, you and me. Because you're not a bad person. You're not a bad person. You're not dumb. Nothing like that. But I know at some point you've probably wondered, like, I don't know if this idea is any good, or I don't know if anybody's going to read this idea, or I don't know if I'm doing it right. Something like that, right? I need you to know that every author you can name from the dawn of goddamn time has thought the exact same thing. It is completely normal to think that. And the answer to, well, I don't know if I'm doing it right, or I don't know if somebody's going to read it, or I don't know if somebody else has done this better, or anything like that. The only way you're going to find out, the only way you're going to answer that question is for you to write the thing, whatever it is, to the best of your ability and put it out there. Just put it out there. That's going to be our end goal no matter what. We can't really get around that. And we don't want to get into a position as writers where we are thinking that we can only write if we know it's a new idea, or if we know that somebody will guarantee read it, or if we know that like it's absolutely lightning in a bottle and we're going to be the biggest deal of all biggest deals. You need to not know that when you jump out into the unknown as an author, because you need to be able to embrace that unknownness. Because the thing that's going to help you fly through the air, if we're using a bird metaphor, the thing that's going to allow you to move forward in this journey through what is at the moment unknown to you, is the confidence that you have done the best you can at as many steps, if not the entirety of all the steps, you've gone through to date. So you can approach writing with more confidence because you did the organizing to the best of your ability. You can approach revising because you did writing to the best of your ability. Does that mean perfect? Did I say the word perfect? Did the word perfect come out of my face? No, it has nothing to do with perfect. It has everything to do with, did you do your best? And so when I talk about organizing, whether it's outlining, whether it's structuring, whether it's planning ahead, I'm only trying to give you tools to help you do your best. Now, are all of these tools going to apply to each and every single person listening to this? No. Or will they apply to everybody to the same degree? No. But somewhere, somehow, some piece of this is going to help you. So don't entirely be closed-minded just because I'm not immediately going like, you there, person number 11 listening to this. That's the tool. That's what you need. You got to remember, these tools are very variable. These tools are very subjective. So you got to be willing to interpret them a little bit, bend them, see how they're going to move for you, see how they're going to work for you. Because my goal here is to better equip you to go forward. That's what I want. I want you better equipped so that you can tell whatever story you're going to tell. And we're starting with organization for this. The first thing you need to know about organizing, the first thing, before we even talk about publishing, before we even talk about anything else, is that when you start to organize your idea, you are saying as much about what the story is about as you are saying what the story is not about. What do I mean? Well, let's suppose I'm going to tell a story about a kingdom at war, right? The minute I start talking about a medieval fantasy kind of wizards and dragons level stuff where a kingdom is at war, I'm immediately not telling the story about like super cosmic interstellar multi-spaceship space marine kind of vibe. By making a decision about what the story is, I am also making decisions about what it's not. If I'm going to write a murder mystery, it is definitely not a romance novel. You would be shocked the number of times that comes up for people when you ask them, hey, what's your book about? Or what are you writing? And you end up giving kind of a real broad, dithering, I'm going to just mention like 11 different things at once and hope one of them excites you kind of answer. Your story, whatever it is, needs only do the things or thing relative to that genre. If you're writing a fantasy novel, it does not need to be a murder mystery. If you are writing a romance novel, it does not need to be epic science fiction. If you are writing epic science fiction, it does not really need to be like a legal thriller. Can you have elements from those other genres? Absolutely. But you don't need to like perfect every part of every genre in your book. It's okay if your book is, mono-equipped. It's good for one thing. It's a monotasker, as they say in the restaurant kitchen industry. It's good for one thing. That's completely fine, especially if it's your first book. Why? Because it's your first book. You can always do more. So when we organize, we're just deciding what the story is about. Now, how do we decide what the story is about? That's up to you. From a publishing, editing, agenting, representational, salesy level, there is none, not a zero, zip. There is no reason to immediately start discounting ideas just because you're like, I don't know how marketable that is. Because here's what's up. All right, hang on. I should get like a sound for secrets, right? Do I have a sound for secrets on this? Like the Inception horn maybe? But like, that doesn't really do anything for me. I don't know. I'll work on it. I'll think about it. I've got like a billion things in this board, so we'll figure it out. But anyway, here's the secret. Any idea can be made marketable depending on your approach. Any idea can be steered towards an audience given how you write it and where you want it to go and what you're doing with it. Now, that audience might not be necessarily the biggest. Like if you really niche down, right? Like if you really write a thing that only 10 people are going to totally vibe with, and you get all 10 of those people, yeah, you've got 100% of your market, 10 people out of 10 people, but it's only 10 people. Don't discount your idea just because the number of people it might possibly supremely appeal to is smaller than the collective, oh my God, everyone's going to love this book. Because you should not be writing so that everyone loves it. Because it's just not going to happen. I don't know if you've met people on the internet, but they really don't work that way. Most humans don't work that way. Write your story and think about what your story is going to be about based on the fact that you like it, and you're pretty sure there's some group of people out there who like it too. And that's our base. It's just a base. It's not a permanent thing. It's not the maximum number of people from whom can only dwindle the number. It's just a starting point. We're going to build it from there. That's a different Monday night, I suppose. But we're going to go from there and go forward. All right? So, we organize idea. We figure out what we're going to say. Once where's our first level of organization? Where's that first thing we need to figure out? It can be tempting to say genre. And it's not necessarily bad to say, oh, I'm definitely doing this and I'm definitely not doing that. But I would push you to go even farther. And with clients, I do. Because I don't really care about the genre yet. I care about the story, and the story is not the genre. It's the same way that, like, my outfit is not contained by, my outfit is covered by my jacket. My outfit is not my jacket by itself. The genre is just the outermost covering. What's beyond it, what's underneath it is more critical. So push to the story. This feels advice akin to dating profiles. You want a profile that strongly appeals to some people rather than one, like a whole bunch of people are going to think I'm generically nice. Yeah, there's some definite overlap. I hadn't thought about dating profiles. It's been too goddamn long since I had to write a dating profile. But yes, there's this idea of niching down, and I have to say, I used to really shit all over that idea. I used to really like be really opposed to niching down because I had this completely wrong idea that niching down meant limiting myself. Well, if I'm niching down, only 20 people are going to like it. Yeah, but you know what? If 20 people like every book I sell, then I'm guaranteed 20 sales. Now, that's not the same as like 1,000 sales. But if 20 people always buy my books and that's enough money for me to keep making more books, I'll just keep selling 20 copies of everything. That's still a damn nice career. So don't necessarily be dismissive of niching down. Also, 20 is a really exaggerated number. But don't be dismissive of niching down because you're going to need to build you hear this term a few times, point of appeal. The thing that somebody reads your story for, the thing they get out of your story. I dig this story. It connects to me on this level, and whatever your thing of appeal is. Like, I love period westerns where the lead character has a tragic flaw, or there's a ticking clock, or it's a romance novel where there are multiple different good, there's different people in the triangle who could fit. Whatever it is that you're gonna like vibe with needs to be present in the story. So when you're organizing it, push to the story. Don't worry about the genre. What's the conflict? What's our plot? What's our thing that we're building the story around? Start with the conflict. No, I didn't think you meant it in a bad way. I did not think you meant it in a bad way. More like I'm just trying to relate that I thought of niching down as this incredibly negative, like, oh my God, this is terrible thing. And I have since, thanks to the benefit of like getting my head out of my ass, I guess, it's not the end of the world to niche down. It's super positive. So when we're thinking about what our story is and how we're going to organize it along the first line of story. What is the primary conflict? Because that conflict is going to help shape our character. It's going to help shape our plot. It's going to help shape our arc for our character. It's going to shape the world building we're doing. What is the most central, the biggest conflict? And I say biggest, not like stakes, like or scale, rather. I'm not talking about like, oh my God, this affects the entire planet. While that might be interesting, take it to the character level. What's the big conflict for our character? Because we're going to be following this character for however many pages, 5, 10, 20, 100, 200, 300, 400, however many pages, how many ever thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words. What is for the character? What is that central conflict? Whether it's internal to them or whether it's external to them or whether it's, I got to take this ring and chuck it in a volcano, or whether it's I got to, blow up the space fascists, or whether I got to go fight the big giant purple space dictator, or whether I got to like fight against the robot uprising, or it's fucking clown season, or whatever. Find that most central thing and make sure you, the author, are as clear as possible about it. Because the clearer you can be about that conflict, then the easier time you're going to have in what are going to be our next steps here. Finding different ways to weave multiple things through that conflict. Like, okay, if our conflict is we have to go throw the ring in the volcano, or we have to defeat the evil general, or we have to, save the malt shop in our town, or we have to win the rock concert at our school, or we have to defeat the supernatural monster that lives behind my locker, or whatever. If that's our conflict, how does our character intercept that conflict? Are they at the heart of it? Is it a thing like I have to learn how to, value other people and take, feedback from them? I have to admit my feelings for this other person. Whatever it is, how does our character, I'm making two fist collision noises, bang, bang, bang. How does our character intercept and or collide with this conflict? That's really going to help you figure out the next step, which is, well, okay, so if our character comes into this conflict in a certain way, what's the arc of this character? And when I say character arc, I don't just mean, well, what does the character do, though that's part of it, but it's how does this character grow and change over the course of the story because of this conflict, or because of the 5 other conflicts that come along for the ride. How does this character grow and change? That is a super critical thing that we're going to talk about down the road when we talk about what publishers are looking for in terms of organized writing. But if you can do that now in the first of 3 stages, you are greasing the wheels to make this loads easier. So how does our character grow, change, evolve? And I should point out, this doesn't have to be solely positive. You can have a character fall apart progressively over the course of the story, a character descend into madness, a character give in to their demons and worsen, a character become a not good person over the course of a story. It doesn't always have to be, oh my God, sunshine and rainbows. But it does have to be in some direction, or be trending upward, called an uphill arc, because picture going uphill, Or is it a downhill arc? Going downhill, sloping downward, getting worse. You can't do both. It does not necessarily have to be a straight line, but you don't always want like a jagged up and down and 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 up and down line like a serrated knife. You don't quite need it to be so even, but you do need an overall slope to things, upward or downward. Now, where that character's going, that's up to you. That's up to your story. That's up to what you choose to decide to do. But you got to know how this character intercepts this conflict. Now, if you've been thinking about this and you're like, well, my conflict is global, John. It's the destruction of this kingdom. It's the stopping of the giant space thing that attacks the whole universe. Okay, that's fine. But if you're thinking about how the character comes in because your character learns a valuable lesson about working with a team, okay, you've got some of the pieces. You're 2/3 of the way there, but you still got to connect that character to the conflict. One of the big giant red flags that we're going to talk about over there in the last third of this is a disconnection between your character and conflict. And if you solve it now in the organizing stage, it's a hell of a lot easier to deal with later on. I'm trying to make it so that you don't have to solve too many problems down the road because you will have solved them in advance. This is also going to help streamline the writing and keep you on track. Because it'll never seem, so long as we organize the character and the conflict, it'll never seem like your character's doing shit just to do shit. There's a purpose to it. We want there to be a purpose. Not necessarily always and only plot, but definitely with a purpose. Does that make sense? Everybody got that? I'm going to stuff a mouthful of tea in my face. Man, it's been a long-ass day. So excuse me if I get extra caffeinated over the course of these 2 hours. All right. We've got our conflict, we've got our character. We know our character is moving upward, uphill or downhill, growing or falling along their arc. What's the next step we need to do? World building. We've got to complete our story triangle, right? We've got some conflicts that can cover a plot. We've got some character and their arcs that covers character. So what's our world building do? A lot of people get stuck at this point because they fall down a rabbit hole of over-organizing the whole world. I'm going to give you 1 million countries. I'm going to give you 1 billion laws. I'm going to give you a trillion number of scientists. In the 3,000 years since this book has been all about space travel and ships and shit, I'm going to give you just a fuck ton of it. Don't. Just don't. I'm not saying you have to not write them, but don't dump them into the manuscript to demonstrate, oh, look how clever I am. I have totally figured this all out. I've given this so much world-building thought. World building is great. You're going to need world building. World building is excellent. You should organize your world building. But the thing with world building is figuring out, like, when to put in the world building you're doing relative to what you're writing. So, for example, if you're writing a fight scene between, I don't know, your protagonist and random goon number 9... that is not the moment to suddenly start, like, talking about the history of, I don't know, a totally different city than the city where this fight is occurring in. It's not really going to make sense. It's not really going to connect. So, try to keep your world building, I don't want to say at a pace with what you're developing, but try to keep it relevant to what you're getting at. And if you find there's a moment where you've got stuff I want to say, man, I got to tell you about the inventor of this wallpaper, or, oh man, you really need to know who, genetically modified bell peppers so that they could be psychic, whatever it might be. If you're having trouble, like, finding where to put that in the story, put it in the story somewhere, but try not to do it in such a way that it interrupts the flow of whatever else is going on. Again, though, remember when we were first starting out, we talked about limitations and boundaries. And so sometimes some of our world building isn't going to make its way into the later drafts or deeper into the story because it's a nice detail and good job spending the imagination and the electrical brain energy to develop it. But sometimes it just doesn't fit. Sometimes it just doesn't, like, it's a nice detail, but it doesn't really have a home here. You could save it for something else. You can put it in, another thing, or you can just say, oh gosh, I've, thought about a thing. How nice for me. But by and large, you've got to go into this knowing that not everything you're creating is going to end up in the draft, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with something you've thought up not making its way forward. That doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean your book suffers. It doesn't mean like anything happened. It just, hey, you thought of more stuff and couldn't use it. I think everybody does that all day. So don't get bogged down in feeling like you need to create an undue or disproportionate amount of world building. But let's most of the time, if you're not going to go to the deep end of the pool with a billion world building things, a lot of people only do the bare minimum. Well, I don't want to go into the deep waters. I don't want to give you a billion. I'm only going to give you the world building relative to main plot. And you don't want to do that either. We don't want to hang out at the extremes, either way into it or really shallow. We don't want to hang out at those extremes no matter what we're talking about. Whether it's world building detail, whether it's plot complexity, whether it's scene word by word sentence description, whether it's character growth, whether it's whatever. We want to do away with the extremes. They can go hang out over there. Like the deep end of the pool with all the nerds and all the people who probably got, shoved into lockers and had their lunch money jacked from them. Go down there with the extra, complex, deep stuff. And the really shallow stuff, well, that can go hang out over there with the people who just couldn't be bothered to, do more than the bare minimum work. We want to jettison those two ends and hang out in that big Z-score, the big middle section of our graph, where we have a fairly fluid but quantifiable amount of everything. We've got enough scene detail, we've got enough world building detail, we've got enough conflict, we've got enough character, that the story more or less finds its consistency. It's, what's the word I want to use? Thickness? That's not the right word. Consistency really is the best word, where everything feels relatively well supported, well built, and supplemented with material. So don't go nuts on world building, and don't go shallow on world building, and don't go crazy deep into trying to weave this hyper intense tapestry for your plot. It's okay if your main plot doesn't grab every single character you've named, because some of the characters you've named are going to be secondary characters, and their direct action in a story is somewhat incidental. They show up once or twice, they do a couple things, but ultimately they're expendable and will be moved on from 10, 20, 30 pages from now. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But we don't want to get into a habit of always feeling like we have to go a million miles an hour deep or barely piddly past. There's a whole big middle ground there that I want you to hang out in. So how do we organize this past the basics of our story triangle, though? Well, now we're going to start to look at outlining structure. Now we're going to start to look at, okay, I've got all these ideas. How do I figure out where to start? Here, I am now pulling back the curtain and showing you how sausage gets made. Here's where you find your starting point. I don't care what genre it is. I don't care what style of writing it is. I'm just going to straight tell you how to do it. That's a really dramatic music score. Wow, okay. I wasn't planning on that moment in sound, but cool. Anyway, here's how you do it. I want you to start your thing, your first chapter, your whatever spot in the story you're writing from, because remember, you don't have to always start on page 1. But whatever you think your first moment is going to be, it better be a moment that has something in it that can engage someone who does not have the same amount of information that you have. Because the reader doesn't know nearly as much as you do about the thing you're writing about. It's your job to tell them. You have a whole book to tell them. But they're reading this paragraph, this scene, this moment, this sentence, these words, whatever you want to identify them as. They're reading this and they don't know anything about what you're intending to do 2 pages from now. They don't know about the twist coming 100 pages from now. They don't know that you've made this really this really great pun 75 pages from now, or 3 chapters from now, there's the great knock-knock joke. They don't know any of that shit. They know nothing about it. They're just looking at what's immediately in front of them. So pick a thing where you can be proud that there's something there that will appeal to someone. Oh man, this is a banger of an action scene. It'll grab somebody. Oh, this is a great moment for character introspection. Oh, this is a really detailed scene where they can get a sense of how I'm going to visually put a picture in their head. Oh, this is a really cool piece of dialogue. Whatever it is, that's what your start is. You don't know who it's going to grab, but you know it's going to grab somebody. That approach will solve a ridiculous number of I don't know where my start is questions. Pick something that's going to grab somebody. Because you have the confidence. Remember we talked confidence like 20 minutes ago? You've got the confidence to know I'm going to write it to the best of my ability, whatever it is. And when we're in an early drafting stage, like this is our first draft or 1.5 draft, if that's how some people want to rationalize their effort or whatever. If you're in the early drafting phase and it's just about getting the words out of your head and onto the page, there's no decision, there's no permanence to the idea of, yeah, you're starting here now. This draft. Draft _3_final_final is a different story. But for now, just first draft. Start wherever. You can always move these things. Start with something that's going to be engaging to somebody somewhere, and then write it to the best of your ability. But how do we organize scenes past the first? Because frequently, lots of people can do the first scene really well. Oh, no, I know exactly what I want to write, dude. It's going to look like this. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Awesome. Fantastic. I'm super pumped for you that you have that. So you have a choice now. You can either advance with the question, what comes next? Or, because the thing you just wrote happened, what are the consequences? Now what? So if you're starting off with this action scene, right? Oh man, these two guys are fighting on a roof and it's raining and da-da-da, and it's going along really well. Okay. If we handle this in the what happens next approach, then the outcome really doesn't matter so much, and that's fine that it doesn't matter, but the outcome really doesn't matter so much because we're just going to move in sequence. A leads to B, leads to C, and so on. So they're on the roof, and they fight, and then maybe one of the guys gets away, so then we pick up with another scene the next morning. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. That's one approach to go. Totally works. But maybe we want to take this in a more visceral direction. Maybe we want to come at this a different way. So we're going to go, okay, well, what are the consequences of scene A? And the consequences are what's going to lead us to scene B. All right, well, if in scene A he get the, our hero, what we'll do, let's not do the gender binary. Our heroine, let's flip it around. Our heroine gets her nose broken. Okay. So that means our heroine is carrying this busted nose for quite a few scenes. So the consequences from A carry into B. There's a different approach here, right? So if we're looking sequentially, on some level you are putting your reader onto the idea that you want them thinking about procedure. A leads to B because B leads to C, and consequence isn't unimportant. It's not like we don't give a shit about consequence, but it is less critical that you hang on every little detail because I'm going to give you a preponderance of detail or multiple details going forward. Nothing wrong with that, just a different approach. Example. You can look at this sort of sequential movement from scene to scene to scene in something like a spy thriller, where the specific details are so numerous, but we don't need to get hung up on them. Because unlike a murder mystery, not every little detail could be the thing that cracks the case wide open. Sometimes it's just loads of details. Well, what comes next? More details. What comes next? More details, and so on. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But it does make a difference when it comes time to kind of move the story along. Moving us in a procedural or sequential way is a great tool if you're the sort of writer who's like, I know where I want to get to eventually. Like, I know I have to have this moment where there's this big fight in the throne room, but I'm not sure how to get there. Moving sequentially can work there because you can go forward up to the scene in the fight, or you can work backwards. Okay, they're fighting in the throne room. How did we get to the throne room? Well, we have to have a scene where this happens. Hang on. So, sorry, I got distracted by a text message. Where was I? Right. We can move sequentially backwards as well. We're in a throne room. How did we get here? How did we get there? 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 So on and so forth till we reach a point where we're familiar. Oh, sweet. Cool. I'm glad that worked. So we have lots of different ways to move sequentially. And this is great if you're somebody who struggles making decisions in terms of what scenes go into the book at all. Like, I don't know, do I need a scene where these two people talk at a deli the next morning? Well, does it sequentially matter to what came before? And does it sequentially matter to what comes next? No? Well, then I guess you possibly don't need it. The red flag here in moving sequentially is that you never really get a sense of development. You tell a very clean, sharp story that's kind of bare bones in some ways. We just have the stuff that's critical and very little, what the term in publishing is fat on the meat or fat on the bone. It doesn't really have any excess fluff. Now, some people love that. Some publishers love that. Some readers love that. Sweet. Great. Good for them. And some stories are better told that way. Great. Cool. Awesome. Other stories, other writers, other publishers, other pimps, agents, other editors, other whatevers, they don't like that. And that's fine, because this is not the only way to tell a story. It's just a way to tell a story. But as we're moving sequentially, you still got all the responsibilities and scenes. You still got to put a picture in the reader's head. You still have to treat the reader's face, particularly their eyes, as the camera. And you are forever positioning their face at the distance and focused on the stuff you need them to be focused on for the sake of this scene. And you're going to put them in the room and angle their face and direct things the way they want. So it's all okay. But what if you don't want to move sequentially? What if we want to go consequentially? Well, then the endings of scenes are going to be more important, because it's those endings, the wrap-ups, that we carry most forward with us. Or it's the big meaty details we gain in the scene. Oh my God, that dude in the helmet is our whiny farm boy's father. Well, what happens now? I guess now he has to, grapple with this terrible burden as he dangles from a roof antenna in space. So the consequence model, cool. The consequence model allows us to not so much worry about the specifics of this room, this scene goes to that room and that scene, but it allows us to stretch the characters' details, the story's conflicts, plots, world buildings, whatever's details, so that it doesn't really matter as much whether we're in this room or that room, or whether we're, coming from the living room to the dining room, or whether we're going from the conference room to the elevator, or what. The specifics matter less. We still have to do them. We still have to talk about them, but we're not going to hang on them as much as if we're going to hang on the idea of it's most important that the reader get a sense that the character is really bugged out about something. That's where we're going with this. A consequential model is often plagued with a problem of under-description, because we're so busy making sure the reader understands what the character is feeling or thinking, or we're so bogged down with, hey, here's this important detail, that we kind of let the other stuff slide. We don't think so much about, what room are we in? Where are we? What's going on? What should I picture in my head right now? So there's always this balancing act. I hope I'm coming across with this in the pre-writing to writing transition and in the early writing stages. There is going to be a balancing act, and everybody's going to find a different balance. And the number of factors that contribute to that balance, they're not necessarily variable from person to person, but the quantities of each vary from person to person. Here are the things you're going to need to deal with. Here we go. One's going to be your sentence choice. It's going to be how you put the words together. This does not mean that there is one specific one-size-fits-all answer for this stuff. It's that what you have is specific to the way you're writing this one time. And somebody else can come along and cover the same idea but do it differently, and both are fine. Your word choice is going to matter. Your sentence structure is going to matter. Not just like, hey, that's not how em dashes work, or what's up with all the extra commas, but more a matter of like, I'm choosing to write long-ass sentences more frequently than I'm choosing to write short fragments. Or all my dialogue contains at least 2 commas, or I don't use dialogue tags at all, ever. Whatever decisions you're making structurally falls into this category here. Everybody clear so far? We're good? Hello, viewers. Hi, it's nice to see all of you. Side note, just before I forget, because I did not mention this last time, this will go up on YouTube tomorrow. Apparently, when I upload the next day, it crashes less. So that's why we're doing YouTube in the future and stream now. And then on Wednesdays, we do Zoom. And here, Zoom, by the way, is mainly for the captions. That's entirely why the Zoom part still persists. You're not missing anything by hanging out here and not over on Zoom. Zoom's just generating auto captions for me. But you're welcome to hang out there too. It's just a different button on the board. Anyway. There's a sneeze coming, and I'm going to try not to sneeze into the microphone or onto the cat. So instead, we will sip some tea and march forward. If you have questions so far, fire away. Because we're still in the I'm writing this down stage. I'm still in the I'm making decisions and laying out my story, either sequentially or consequentially. And I'm moving through all the pieces I need to move through. I'm moving down my character arcs. I'm moving down my plot. I'm building the world. I'm laying all these pieces together and seeing how they interface and interlock for the sake of building a story. Your job... Hang on, let me move the microphone up a little bit. Sorry, Linus, I got to move a little bit, buddy. Oh, there we go. Your job, writing this, whatever the hell you're writing, doesn't matter. Whatever you're writing, your job is to write it all down. Yeah, I know. There's going to be like real concern that you've gone past some arbitrary number of words, or that it's going to feel really short, or that it's going to feel like you're beating a dead horse and you've over-explained everything, or you've starved this thing and it, for $2 a day, Sally Struthers should, coming to sponsor your story or whatever. Did I just date myself with that reference? I feel like I dated myself with that reference. I don't even know if people do that to mitigate white capitalist guilt. But I think the fact still remains that no matter what, your job is to get it all down on the page. One of the things I want to take a moment here to talk about in terms of organizing is that push towards editing while you write versus just writing it down. And this is not just because I make a good chunk of my living editing other people's stuff. This is because, plain and simple, if you're writing, you should be writing. And if you're going to revise or edit, you should revise or edit after the writing. So just write it all down. Yeah, I'm aware you might need to trim out big giant chunks of story, or you might need to add things, or you might need to do both. That's fine. Totally fine. The neighborhood animals are going fucking berserk. I don't know what's going on. Must be something out in back. Anyway, crazy. I know, Linus. I know they're disrupting your nap. Anyway, so we have this sort of idea that it needs to be written and it needs to stay within these boundaries, and if you exceed these boundaries, all of a sudden, oh my God, it's terrible. No, just no. While you're writing it down, while you're in the middle of getting it all on the page, get it all on the page. Yes, the finished product, whatever you're deciding to do with it, should have some relative constraints and boundaries to it. But if you're not there yet, if you're not laying it out yet, don't worry about that stage yet. Let's use a food metaphor to illustrate this. You're making a birthday cake. You're busy, beating together the flour and the eggs and stuff to make the dough, and you're already sweating how you're going to ice this thing. I mean, eventually it needs icing. All cakes do. Or frosting, depending on whatever it is wherever you're at. It's either icing or frosting. It's going to need that thing on the covering that's made mostly of sugar. You're going to need that at some point. But the stage to worry about how you're going to, decorate this thing is not the same stage where you are putting together the dough. It can be nice to take a moment and have some consideration, I think I'll do vanilla this time. But beyond that, this is not the moment to worry about the icing on the cake. So don't worry about the icing. Worry about making the cake. Worry about the writing. Don't worry about the word count right now. Because the worst case scenario, if you go way over, then you split it into 2 books or 3 books. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Or you trim it down. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Or you fatten it up if it needs it. Nothing wrong with that. But those are all decisions you make after you get the whole thing out of your head. Don't go into this process trying to jump through some hoop when you're not entirely sure that hoop is a problem. Don't make it a problem. Because it's just not going to work in your favor. So don't worry about it. Write to the best of your ability at all times. Whether that's one scene at a time or a pile of scenes or your character arc or whatever. You're going to get it all down. Your goal at this stage, in this moment, for this part of what we're talking about, should be to complete the draft. That's your goal. Whether it's a first draft, a second draft, a third draft, a 27th draft, whatever numberth draft, right? Your goal should be to get it complete. And when I say complete, I don't just mean complete you need 80,000 words and it's 80,000 words. I mean the entire story has come out of your head and lives now in this manuscript. However big it is, however small it is. You got it all out. And it's detailed so that somebody who isn't you, who doesn't know all the stuff that you know, can go through it and go, oh, I've learned something. They can picture it in their heads. You have, as we say here, both on this Twitch channel, in the YouTube, in the chats, and everywhere else, you have put a mental movie in someone's brain theater. That's your job. That's going to be your job, whether you write one book and then never again do it, or whether you make a career out of this, or whether you do this as a hobby, or whether you do this just to see, win a bet, or whether you do this because you want to be able to make sure you take your mom out of the hood, or whatever it is you're going to do. Why is this ringing right now? I'm doing a thing, phone. Chill. Anyway. Sorry. Who the hell is calling at this hour? Dude, I'm in the middle of something. Anyway. Sorry. Apologies. Your reader, whomever they might be, wherever they are, doing whatever they're doing, they don't know and they're never going to know as much as you know. So your job is to get as complete a story out to them as possible. Told at the best of your skill at the time you're telling it. Now, this brings up a very interesting organizational point. Because let's say you spend, I'm going to make up times and dates. Do not consider these things to be anything other than my example. Let's suppose it takes you a year to draft this story. Just because it's a nice round number, right? 12 months worth of writing. Presumably, if you've been doing it consistently and you've been following, you're doing your best at all times, you're reading other material, you're adapting your style, you're getting better over time, presumably the writing you do in month 12 should be better than the writing you're doing in month 1. And that's going to leave your overall draft somewhat stunted. It's going to seem like, oh, your beginning sucks compared to your ending because it's the most recent thing you've done and you got better over time, so your ending should be in better shape than your beginning, right? Well, good news. Once the draft is done, the first line, well, not line, I don't use the word line. The first tier, can we call them tier? The first tier of revision should be to, ready, here's your technical term, homogenize your quality. I didn't come up with that term. That's a Penguin Random House term. You want to make sure that your beginning is of the same caliber as your ending. So you want to apply the lessons you've learned from months 2 through 12 back to the stuff you did in month 1. Or, to put it in broader terms, you want to make sure your ending doesn't sound, your beginning doesn't sound like it's your, oh my God, the very beginningest of beginnings compared to your ending, which you're feeling much stronger about or much more solid about. Every writer, I don't care who you're about to name in chat, every writer since cave paintings on walls has been at a time in a position where there are better spots in the book than others. Oh man, they really loved writing this arc. They really loved this scene. They really loved this chapter. And they had to go back and try and make the stuff they clearly didn't like, because all writers have favorites. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But they got to go back and make the stuff that they're not so hot about better than just kind of, I got to get this done. Jesus. So how do you do that? How do we organize to make that possible and successful? We go back to the tools of construction and we apply them using the knowledge gained over the length of our writing experience. So if we're, again, using our 12-month example, and I just picked an example, whether you want to call it 100 days or 10 weeks or 2 months or whatever, time doesn't matter here. The fact remains that after you're all done, you should be in a better spot than when you started. And that means you should also be able to do the tools better, because when you started using them way back, you weren't so familiar with them. So now when you go back and look at your opening scenes and you're like, okay, scenes need the following things. They need, characters with clear goals. They need descriptions as though the reader's in the room. They need, a sense of movement. They need characters attempting things. They need emotional temperatures. All that stuff we've talked about in chats and elsewhere. And you can go back and read your stuff. Oh man, I did okay. I think I could do it better now if I go back to it. And then you go back and you do it better. There isn't going to be a perfect. This isn't about perfect. It's just about getting it better than it was. Because now you're no longer writing it for the first time. Now you're going back and you're revising. Just so that we're clear on this, revising is the stuff you do to your own writing, and editing is the stuff somebody else does to your writing. You revise, other people edit. That's the distinction I need you to start thinking about, especially if you're going to go down the traditional route. Because those two terms are going to get used in two different ways. Here are the ways. Revisions carry a natural bias. There's going to be stuff you miss. There's going to be stuff that you read it and you're like, I know what I meant. So you don't think it's as vague as it could be to somebody else. Or you understood what you're trying to say. So when you read a thing back to yourself, you're like, yeah, I totally get that. Revisions carry a natural bias that you can't really do too much about. But that's why we have editors. That's why we have other people come in and take a look at our stuff, because they don't have that same bias. They have a different set of biases, which is a different discussion altogether. But when it comes down to reading a thing, a good editor should be able to look at it and treat it both as somebody who's looking at it for technical structural ability. Oh, that's how you put words together. As well as somebody who's looking at it and treating it like, I'm a reader reading this for the first time. Does this make sense to me? Good editors are able to juggle both of those things. The less good editors tend to do one or the other, and they usually tend to favor the structural, crunchy, dogmatic, like rules and things, And they're willing often to sacrifice story or readability or humanity, for lack of a better word. Like, they'll make it technically true and suck the soul out of it long before they'll try to bring nuance into it. And there's a number of reasons for that. Again, totally a different discussion. But it's all to counter that natural revising bias. When you're organizing your story way back, and when you're writing your story, not as way back, don't fall into the trap. Do not fall into the trap of thinking you have to eliminate this bias before you can write. Just write. It's going to be there whether you know it or not, because you're a human being and that's how human beings communicate. Sorry. It's how your brain works. It's just going to be there. So, don't overthink it. Just keep going. When you revise, the first thing you want to do is make sure your beginning matches your end in terms of quality. That doesn't mean like change your plot points. It just means that the parts of the story that you can identify as being weaker written compared to other parts, those are the parts you start to address. You're going to revise them in such a way, whether that's fixing sentences or come at the scene in a whole new way or just outright deletion or any combination of those things, where you make an effort to try and improve the material. Maybe that means making a whole new opening. Maybe that means coming at it in a different direction. Maybe it just means rewriting the sentences so that they're slightly clearer. Who knows? But you do your best by yourself to revise this thing and get it in what you perceive to be, here's the really critical thing, what you perceive to be its best shape. This is true no matter how we're going to publish this thing. You need to be able, before we move to the next draft, you need to be able to get this thing, this manuscript, this book, into its best relative shape at the time. So if it's a first draft, sucker needs to be completed, and it needs to be fairly, homogeneous in its content. Yeah, it's going to have bumps, warts, bruises, and lumps. It's going to have spots that need work. It's going to have things you can poke at with a stick. It's going to have all these different pieces for all these different things. That's totally legit and totally a thing. And that's okay. And as we move from draft to draft, there's going to be different things that come up. There's going to be different things that are affected in different ways. But ultimately, from first draft to second draft, as we revise, we are just looking to smooth out the story and make sure we got all of it down on the page. From second to third draft, that's where we're going to start kind of interrogating our ideas a bit more aggressively. We're going to make sure that the quality of writing is consistent. We're going to make sure that we're touching on all the points we want to have. Do we have theme? Do we have arcs? Do we have, character conflict moments? Do we have emotional temperature in our scenes? Do we have descriptions for everything? Does this put an effective mental movie in somebody's brain theater? One thing at a time. And it's in this part of what we are now firmly in stage 2 of 3. We now definitely want to create a checklist that we can go through for all of our drafts post first draft, so that over time, whether it's second draft, third draft, fifth draft, this stage can go on forever. It does not matter how many times or how many steps it takes to go through this. It's entirely up to you. It's not golf. We don't want the smallest number possible. We just want to be able to get through this stage at some point. Okay? I noticed the chat got really quiet. I want to make sure everybody's all right. I get a little concerned. It's good to see all of you. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. If you're really digging everything, by all means, feel free to follow. It's free. Or if you're really, really digging this and you want to see more stuff like this, you hit subscribe. That really super helps. Everything is always as appreciated. If you want to, I'm supposed to mention that, there's a tip at the top of the page now. If you want to keep the lights on and feed this cat, who this evening, by the way, just discovered that he really, really, really likes ground buffalo. Like to a disturbing degree. Like I had to keep him away from the dish as I'm cooking it. Yeah, because he's a monster. Anyway, Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you. It's wonderful to see you. I hope you're finding this stuff helpful. This is the sort of thing we do every Monday. Consider this, the best free college class in writing you never got. So, here we are in the draft stage, right? And we're going to be here as long as we need to be here. And it's not a value judgment on us, and it's not a sign of our immaturity or our poor development. It doesn't mean we're not supposed to be a writer if we have to do a fourth draft. It doesn't mean it's not the universe giving us a sign that, oh, you suck at this, bro, go do something. Nothing like that at all. Nothing like that at all. Has whatever. The hashtag writing community is going to tell you that, if you got to do that, you're supposed to take these hints. There's no hints. This is a great question coming up in chat. Is there an average for how many drafts a book goes through when traditionally published? Or does it vary too much? Average? 4. And I'm saying that based on my experience. The majority of traditionally published books, and I have worked on some doozies, the average is about 4. Now, sometimes that means a lot of people do it in 3. A lot of times that means people do it in like 5 and change. The most drafts I've ever seen for a book that got traditionally published was 17. That's not the norm. Don't panic. And that was like multiple years and multiple rewrites and multiple editorial teams coming through. So there was a lot of other factors going on. But by and large, it really does vary a lot. There's an average, sure, but the amount of time it takes to reach that, it's not uncommon to spend, 8 months to a year on a first draft, but then 2 or 3 years on a second and third draft, because a combination of life circumstances as well as just it takes longer to get better at this. There's so many factors that go into it. For most people, just get past a second draft and it's going to be okay, because there's other parts of this process that can help you out, like getting an editor, like getting a coach, like getting some beta readers, like bringing in others, like not just writing, this yourself in a small bunker. There's so many other tools you can use to bring this all together that it really does make a significant difference. But for now, just if you're new at this, just get through that first draft and then celebrate and then move on to the second. It was very Ship of Theseus. That's a really good way to put it. After a while, the story, honestly, that book is out now. You can buy it. It's pretty good, but it's not the same book it was in the first 2 drafts. I'll tell you that right now. But that's okay. I'm not even sure my name's on the newest edition because I'm so removed from that process. This was many moons ago. But all the same, yeah. Also, hi, how am I? I'm good. I'm over my cold. It was a busy, crazy day here. Loads of stuff going on, loads of meetings, loads of activity. But I'm, as always, super, super pumped to be here, talking about this stuff, answering questions, doing all that we do. Oh my God, chat blew up. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. Thank you for coming. If you're new here, this is what we do every Monday. I take a topic and we just bust it out for a while. Yes, and that writer, he should absolutely get a trophy or something. I think the publisher sent him and he lived at the time. His publisher was in Virginia, and he was in Tasmania. Yeah, I think he was in Tasmania at the time, and I believe, because I was doing editing, I was consulting on their editing department at the time. I believe they sent him a case of wine and like a hoodie or something, but like a fancy ass hoodie, like a ridiculously we spent $100 more on the making of this hoodie just for you kind of hoodie. Yeah, he endured quite a bit of professional tumult with that project, and good for him for sticking with it. I'm pretty sure he's still writing. I sort of lost touch with him, and that's fine. But Yeah, I haven't even followed up. I'm 90% certain he's still writing the same series. Presumably, it's not taking him this many drafts going forward, but all the same. So, I'm good. Thank you for being here. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate you. I love you all. This is fantastic. Let's keep going. So, we're working on our drafts, and we've homogenized our sound. It all comes across, and our beginning is in as good a shape as we can get relative to where we are at the time we're doing it. We have got to build this checklist, though, to make sure that in subsequent drafts, we are attacking the right things. And I thought initially about doing this from the writer side. What are the things that you should go to look at to build your craft? And that's important. And those are some things I want to touch on. But I also want to give you the publishing side. So we're going to kind of blend the second and third stages of our discussion here, because there are some definite things publishing, whether we're talking about pimps, agents, or whether we're talking about readership for self-publishing, or whether we're talking about editors, depending on who you're going to submit to, or whether we're just talking about other pros. There are some definite things that everybody's going to poke at with a stick on a scene-by-scene level, on an act-by-act level, on a story structural level. You should be able to navigate this occasional minefield without too much anxiety. I know I'm making it sound like it's the beginning of Saving Private Ryan. I don't mean it to. But you need to know that when you send your thing out, especially in traditional publishing, your work's either going to get ignored or scrutinized. And it is my belief that you should be able to endure both, whether it's total silence on the receiving end or whether it's somebody, breaking out the good silverware and going to town. You should be able to handle it. And I want to make sure you can. So let's talk about what those things, publishing, the trad side, or if we're looking at self-publishing, it's what readers are going to do. To a different degree, in a different angle, but it's the same content. It's the same ideas. You as a writer should be able to identify on a scene-by-scene basis what each scene is doing. Not just what happens in the scene, but what the function of the scene is within the greater context of the story. Scene number 9 is a scene where we introduce some plot elements. Scene number 27 is where the two characters have some back and forth dialogue that reveals something about their relationship. You can point to a structural kind of definition, for lack of a better word, as to what the scene's about. This is the scene. This is the big fight scene. This is the scene right before the big fight scene where we sort of lay out the character has fears about the fight scene. This is the scene where the antagonist realizes that it's not going to be easy to defeat the underdog hero. You should be able to point to your scenes and go through your scenes and say what each scene is. This is not done explicitly in the manuscript, right? That's really clear. Everybody's got that, right? This is not a matter of like at the top of the page, you need to, no. This is just for you in your notes. This is just you in your head. Ideally, you want to turn this into a written down thing so that you don't have to carry all your shit in your brain. But you should be able to identify like, okay, this scene does this scene does that, this scene's about this scene's about that. Because from the publishing side, your potential representation / pimp or your editor or your publisher is looking at every scene to see if it's going to handle some combination of the following. Is this scene, the scene they're reading, dealing with main plot and character arc? Is this scene dealing with main plot and theme? Is this dealing with character arc and theme? Those three sets, main plot and character arc, main plot and theme, character arc and theme, those are the big ticket items, the big special prizes we all want out of the claw machine. Those are the big things traditional publishing is going to prioritize when it comes to looking at a scene to see if it works for them, for lack of a better word. your scenes need to, on some level, be able to do that double duty. They need to be able to say something about main plot. They need to be able to say something about something else in addition. It doesn't have to be this massive, revelation every time. Sometimes it's just going to be the ittiest bittiest reinforcement. So, for example, if we have a scene where a character says, "Yeah, I'll go do I'll go fight the bad guy," that definitely moves plot forward. Good. And maybe it reinforces the existing idea that your character is, willing to take on a challenge. It's not this huge revelation like, "Oh my God, I, the character, am so mighty and so profound that I do, the biggest things ever." But it's at least something. It's not just like, "Oh, that's the scene where I talked about all the lawn chairs." Because while you might have described the hell out of the lawn chairs, it might be the best lawn chair scene since F. Scott Fitzgerald's lawn chair scene. But, yeah, it needs to be doing more than that. It needs to be more than just, "Oh, that's the scene where I use the word perfunctory really well." Yeah, that's not really enough. So they're looking for plot and arc combination. They're looking for plot and theme combination. They're looking for arc and theme combination. Knowing that, way back here in our drafting stage, you should be able to point to the scenes and look at them and go, "Okay, what is this scene doing? Is this a plot scene? Great. Is it a plot and arc, character arc scene? Is it a plot and theme scene? Is it an arc and theme scene?" And if you're sitting there going, "Oh shit, John, oh shit, what do? I don't know about my theme. Where are my themes at? What am I going to do? I don't have any themes. I'm fucked." You're not. I got you. Of course I got you. You're here. Of course I'm going to give you a couple tools to get you out of this. It's not the end of the world. Be cool. If you're not sure what your themes are, first of all, come on. Themes. You need them. A theme, and I feel like I cover this just about every week, a theme is a lesson the reader can install in their own life. They can take it from your book and go, "Oh, this story that I just read, this whatever it is an example of this idea that affected me so that I can go forward in my own life. This story is a story about, sticking up for the little guy. This story is a story about, defeating the patriarchy through, ass kickery. This story is a story about accepting the truth in unfair circumstances." Whatever. That theme and those decisions around what composes your theme exist all the way back when we were talking about making that conflict. You might not have realized it because I didn't say, "Hey, quick, make a theme up." But depending on the kind of conflict you chose and depending on the kind of character arc you shaped, how you would summarize what kind of plot it is and how you would summarize what kind of experience the character has, that's the basis of your theme. You can add to it, you can embellish it, you can fortify that theme description by adding more facts in about the story. Well, it's also where, we've got this B plot where two characters have to admit their feelings for each other. So there's also some theme work there. Or it's about, everybody coming together despite differences. So it's about found family. You look at your plot and you look at your conflicts to help shape not so much shape, but to detail. That's the word I'm looking for. To detail your theme. Unless you're coming into this where you've got like a specific theme in mind, like I am telling a theme about somebody accepting who they are. And like totally, absolutely, that's a thing you're going to have running through the whole story because you want to tell this story. Because you want Keanu Reeves to have a career past Bill and Ted. And you're deciding you're going to talk about one of the greatest cyberpunk dystopic science fiction series of all time. And by the way, you want some really amazing representation for the LGBTQ plus community. Well, then I guess your theme's going to be front and center because you're telling the Matrix. Totally fine. Totally fine. But by and large, the vast majority of writers are not sitting down with a theme first and foremost in their head. They're thinking about conflict. They're thinking about character. They're thinking about just cool shit to have happen to a made-up person. And that's fine, but we got to go the extra step and come back to theme. And in our later drafts and in our revision process overall, we don't have to sweat theme so much in that first draft because our first draft's job is just to get it out on the page. But in our subsequent drafts, as we get deeper into the draft process, we want to think about, okay, how many themes, because it is possible to have too many. Like if you're trying to serve 6 themes, unless your book is like well over 200,000 words and is this big, giant, massive epic, 6 themes is really most of the time too many. Usually 1 to 3 themes is just fine. And also, I should point out from a traditional publishing standpoint, any more than 3 themes, it's either going to come across to the reader like you're trying too hard, like, oh, you've been in the hashtag writing community and you've had this discussion about themes and you're trying way too hard for me to realize that you've taken an MFA class. Or they're going to get overlooked because it's just too much. 1 to 3 is totally fine. Same with character arcs. You need 1 because you got a main character. Could you have others? Sure. But there's going to be a point of like too many. Not every character you introduce needs to have a character arc. Sometimes characters are just there to facilitate other people's arcs, and they themselves don't have an arc. A great example of a character who exists in a story who doesn't themselves have an arc, Yoda in the original Star Wars trilogy has no arc. Yoda is a facilitating character. Yoda is there just to make sure Luke gets part of an arc. That's fine. We can deal with Yoda in cartoon form and CG non-Muppet form later. That's a different discussion for a different day. But by and large, not all characters you introduce need arcs. They don't need their own B-plot. You want to keep your B-plots around your primaries, that's your protagonists, and your secondaries. They're sidekicks. They're important people who are integral to a story but not necessarily given a point of view. They're the people who get B-plots. These are things that traditional publishing, by the way, is also looking for. Maybe they're not writing it down to the degree that, I am. I'm going to take notes. I've got notes on every client I have. Sometimes it's in my head. Sometimes it's just shorthand on a Post-it note. Sometimes it's just, 6 characters, 3 female identifying, 3 male identifying, pair these 2 off, put this one in the middle. But in my head, I know what it means. I know what it looks like. And that's the kind of thing you should be able to do for your own work. You should know your work well enough to be able to break it down into its constituent pieces. Traditional publishing is going to try and break it into its own set of pieces. Maybe they'll succeed, maybe they won't. That's on them to deal with. Your job is just to deliver the story as best you can with what you have. So you've got your plot. Now your plot scenes, I want to break this down into further organizational stuff. Your plot, your main plot, we're also going to call it the A plot. Primary plot, whatever you want to call it. Your A plot should have the following pieces, which, again, get organized as far back as the I have an idea about a story stage. It should have, to some degree, it needs to have a point of introduction into the story where the main character, your protagonist, your primary character, it's all the same thing, has some point of introduction to it. Because that point, that moment, that scene is the bridge between first act and second act. So you got to have one of those because that's how the plot starts in your story. Totally fine. It's got to be there somewhere. Arguably, if you're about to do one of those smart-ass things like, John, I'm telling my story backwards, arguably, then your moment would be the moment where the plot is introduced to the reader. But that's the obnoxious way to do things. And the vast majority of people doing that are really doing it to just show you the fact that they can play with the system. Like, haha, I know the cheat code. No one gives a shit. It's the moment where the character is first introduced to the story, even if it's not chronologically accurate in the story's world. It's just where it shows up in the book. So, you got to have a point of introduction. And then from there on, you have to have some amount, more than 2, scenes or moments where the plot develops. What does that mean? Stuff happens. It develops. You're adding stuff to the plot. Maybe those are challenges. Maybe those are conflicts. Maybe those are discoveries. Maybe those are fights. Maybe that's some combination of all of the above. Some amount of them, more than 2. Why more than 2? Because if you just have 2, it's going to be a really short plot. And maybe that's great if you're writing a really short book. But by and large, the number of people who come to these chats, and by and large, the number of people who listen to my YouTube stuff, they are not writing like children's books. Because every time I'm like, hey, I should do a stream on children's books, I might as well talk to the cat. I might, not even the cat, I might as well talk to the case I store my Bluetooth speaker in, because I'll get the same level of reception. And that's fine. That's totally fine. One day, somewhere, in some medium, I will talk about children's books. This is not that right now. But for now, you're developing your plot in 2+ scenes. Ultimately, however many scenes that is, totally fine. Is there a too much? Yeah. You'll know when you've got too much when you're just struggling to try and find extra moments to put in your story. Ultimately, all those developments make the climax of your story inevitable. There's no escaping the climax. You can't tell your story without the climax. Because the climax is the moment where the maximum or the maximum possible number of things come out in your story. It's the moment where your character is tested the most, where the stakes are the highest, where the danger is the greatest, where the risk is the most critical, where there's, the hardest consequences, where it's the most whatever, and it has the most direct effect on the character. Oh man, I gotta go wrestle this old guy next to the German waterfall. Oh man, I gotta, use space magic to shoot the sperm torpedoes into the space fascist building. Oh man, I gotta go fight Alan Rickman. Whatever. You gotta have a climax. The climax is the inevitable intersection between protagonist and antagonist. It's inevitable. If you have somehow found a way to not have a climax in your story, you've missed a critical element in story building. Now, this is probably a good moment organizationally to bring up one of the big, for lack of a better word, dumb things I hear from writers. But John, I'm making a series. Shouldn't the big climax of my series happen in a later book? Sperm torpedoes. Go look at the it's not photon torpedoes. Go look at the missile shot out of the X-Wing in the OG Star Wars. Not the special enhanced edition, but the original, like if you still have the VHS cassettes, because those proton torpedoes shot into the exhaust port of the Death Star look very spermy. I'm going to go back to the dumb thing now. I feel like I should do more of a voice for the dumb thing. Hang on. Let's do more of a voice. Let's amuse me. Oh my God, John, I'm doing a series. So shouldn't I save the big climax with the villain for a later book when I can pay everything off? Yeah, but that doesn't excuse the fact that this book in this part of the series should have a climax of some kind. Because a series isn't just one big arc split into pieces. It's a load of little arcs laid next to each other. There's an arc per book, and the cumulative effect of all of these plots and all of these arcs combine into a series. The idea that it's one big season, one big long stretch, and there's only one climax and it comes 8 things in, is the influence from television. And television disguises the interior moment climaxes, that would be the climax of the episode, by making it seem smaller proportionally to the big climax of the season. It's a different medium. It uses some but not all of the same tools, and we cannot apply some and not all of the same tools backwards in fiction, in prose. Each book in a series should be its own contained book, meaning it has a beginning, middle, and end, an introduction and development, a climax, and a resolution. Yes, like Goku fighting anybody. Goku working his way through everybody so that like we're going to fight the one guy before we go fight Frieza. Or, we've got to work our way through the Subgoons. Those are interior climaxes. Frieza is our season-wide villain, or in our book series, if we just had a Frieza saga, it would just be Frieza as our big villain. We'd probably face him off in the last book. But each episode would be its own story, its own novella, if we're going to really split hairs. And each novella needs to be contained by itself, because you don't know if the viewer is only ever going to take this one novella and go, yeah, I watched that, or I read that book, and not read the others. And this is where the next dumb thing comes up. But John, I'm writing so well. Of course they're going to read my stuff. You can't guarantee that. You can't guarantee that. There are loads of factors. Maybe they don't like it, no matter how well you've written it. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe they can't afford your other book. Maybe your other book isn't available where they are. Maybe they found a better series they liked more for whatever reason. Each book in a series, I don't care how many series it is, I don't care how many books it is, each book should be self-contained, just in case the reader doesn't read any more in the series past that. It just happens. That's just how this works. In our later drafts, as we move forward and go through this, each draft presumably gets better over time. And when I say gets better, here's what gets better mean. Prepare to pull that curtain back one more time. I should have loaded a curtain pulling sound effect, shouldn't I? What somebody's looking for, what you should be looking for in terms of getting better over time, are the following things, not necessarily in this order, but to some degree. 1, your ability to get the picture out of your head and into words so that it can go into somebody else's head should be improving every time. You should be getting better at translating the image from your brain to the page. 2, the complexity of your ideas should be improving over time. What does complexity mean? Complexity means like you're not just telling very hypersimplistic, see, Dick, run. Run, Dick, run. You're evolving things. You're moving the camera mentally in the reader's head. You are creating scenes with action and momentum. You are developing more than just a bare bones idea. The quality and complexity of your writing is improving over time. Next thing. The words you're choosing and the way you are crafting them on the page is improving. You're no longer making some of the same grammar errors you were making before. You are learning to vary your sentence lengths. You are you're more effectively putting the punctuation where the punctuation should go. You're not making the same mistakes with, extra that's or extra hads or extra wases. You're able to point to an improvement of, okay, I know how to write better now. Next thing. Over the course of draft to draft, these are the things that should be improving. You should be able to more clearly articulate what your character's experience through certain parts of the story is. You should be able to look at any scene and go, okay, by this point of the story, we are this far along, however far along, in the arc. Coming up next, there's these challenges, there's these issues, there's these victories, there's these losses. This is what's coming up next, whatever it might be, and that moves our character forward to the next part in the arc. You should be able to articulate that better. because you will have written it more than once, because you will have thought about it more than once, because you will have developed it more than once. Next thing. Your ability to describe the mental movie in a paused, screen by screen, frame by frame, moment by moment description has improved. That doesn't mean you're adding extra stuff to just add extra stuff. You're not congesting the frame. It's not like, we're going to go look at my neighbor's garage, which is just, they roll the door up and then it's just packed to the gills. It's just that the quality of the description, it might only have 5 things in it, but you've described the hell out of those 5 things. You're able to improve how you have written it. Next thing, you are able to identify the theme, and you can point to the moments in the story where the theme pops up. A little bit here, and a little bit there, and a little bit over here, and a little bit more over here, and that's fine. There's going to be spots in the story where the theme is more present than others, and that's okay. In fact, it's to be encouraged. Next thing. You are able to point to, from draft to draft, or from sections of writing to sections of writing, you are able to point to moments where you, the writer, have improved your work so that you have a clearer sense of who the character is. I got better at writing my character here. I got better. I like this part. And you're able to distinguish the stuff you're really proud of from the stuff you're sort of like, well, I did it. It's okay to be proud of your work. It's okay to be proud of many stretches of your work. It doesn't make it bad. It doesn't make you bad. You need to be proud of your work. Nobody else is going to be proud of your work unless you're proud first. Because no one's going to know you did anything unless you say something about it. So, you got to be your first biggest cheerleader. And I know for many of us, myself included, that can be incredibly difficult sometimes. But good organization, going one thing at a time right down this list, can help us find the things to be proud of if we are willing to be proud of them. And I believe in you, and I think you're able to look at this list and point to the things from this list and go, I'm proud of this. Cool. Mouthful of tea time. Questions so far? Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Just out of curiosity, I'm pressing a button. I don't expect anything to happen on your end. Yeah, nothing happened on my end. Okay. I am 99% certain that button does nothing, but I'll deal with that later. Okay. Questions so far? Else we will march along to our last third, the publishing reception side of things. All right, here we go. So early on, we organized a lot of stuff, and we were able to write our first draft and turn that first draft into subsequent drafts, second draft, third draft, however many drafts. But now we're at a point where we're done. How did we know we're at that point, first of all? How can we organize ourselves so that we know that point is now? You're done. Your draft is done when the majority of the following things are satisfied. 1, you have, to the best of your ability, at the time you write it or wrote it, you've gotten the whole story on the page. There's nothing hanging out. 2, the way you have written the story is, to the best of your ability, written out where anything else you'd have to do, anything else you'd have to change is a little bit more cosmetic than structural. What does that mean? Well, like, okay, I could make them 2 inches taller. I could give them a pet cat. Oh, what if I made it snow instead of rain? Yeah, these are all changes you could make, and they would make a difference in the story. But do they ultimately change the story in a substantial way so that you can markedly make a difference? Or are we really just putting on a different hat, but the story's been done for a while? A lot of writers stick around in this space out of the fear that the next steps will be automatically failures, or that they'll be very hard, or that it's a lot more comfortable to be a writer writing drafts than a writer trying to get published. And again, this is why we want to organize, because if you want to be a writer, if you want to publish the book for whatever reason, whatever the book is, whatever that case is, this step has to happen. You have to be finished writing, because it's time to either send the book out to be traditionally published or publish it yourself. Eventually, you have to do that. I don't know how long that'll take you. You can finish the book and get it all nice, neat, and done, and then take like 20 years off. Do 2 decades worth of living. Whatever you want to do. Totally fine. And then turn around and publish the book. That's up to you. You might finish it and never publish. But it is my contention that you're not really a published author if you're not going to publish what you've authored. To me, that just seems pretty obvious. But I know a lot of writers who wrote a book. They wrote tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words to the best of their ability multiple times. It's all nice, neat, and polished. But for whatever reason, they keep finding problems. They keep finding things they need to change. They keep finding reasons they can't move forward. And that's fine, because we can always, if we scrutinize hard enough and panic intensely enough, we can always find reasons to not go forward. But understand that the longer we stay in this space of not going forward, the longer we deny ourselves the benefits of going forward. Because you can write this thing forever. Go ahead. Make a 255th draft. Go ahead. Come at the character one more time. Make a theme even clearer. What are you going to do after that? You're going to go to draft 256? You can. Nothing's stopping you. But there's never going to be a perfect book. We've done the best we can organizing everything so far up to this degree. We've done the best we can. It's never going to be perfect. So if you're doing all this extra labor because you're just afraid, that's fine. But I would appreciate you saying so. I really would. Because after a while, this just kind of gets a little silly. It's okay to be afraid. And it's okay to say, you know what, I'm so scared I'm not going to be able to go forward. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't, kick you out of the cool person's club. You don't, they're not going to take away your toys, nothing like that. It's just that you're not going to publish. So that avenue is closed to you until you are willing to move forward. But once you decide to move forward, it's a whole new set of challenges. And I want to organize you and prep you for them. One of the first hurdles there on that end is your ability to present the book as though it is a finished product, which means we're no longer talking about like, yeah, I wrote 10,000 words over the last 2 weeks, or, I wrote 25 pages. We're no longer looking at the construction of the book, but we're looking at the story as a whole, because you need to be able to talk about the book as a whole, whether that's a pitch or a query or a synopsis or anything like that, or just straight sales copy. You've got to be able to think about this book as a finished thing and talk about it in its entirety. And if you are currently thinking the thought, oh my God, but what about spoilers? I don't know how to tell you this, but I need you to either suck a lemon or kick rocks. Maybe both. The publishing side of things, I'm not talking about readership, just straight publishing. Pimps, agents, editors, publishers, writing coaches, freelance editors, none of us give a shit about spoilers. We're in the business of crafting the best physical book possible so that it can be sold, so that everybody involved can make some kind of a living on it. You will need to give spoilers to some of these people. They are not readers. They are not your audience. They are there to help you and facilitate your career. Your editor does not care about spoilers. Your editor wants the best book humanly possible made by you. They want your best work. They want to help bring your best work out of you. They want to equip you going forward to continue making better and better work. Spoilers, and thinking they're very precious, gets in the way of that. So, knock it off. I don't care what the hashtag writing community says that you should do about spoilers. Kick rocks, or suck lemons, or both. Because that is a juvenile, immature, stupid, unrealistic way to approach craft. Because the hashtag writing community isn't a community and doesn't want you writing. They want you talking about writing. And that's a different argument for a different day. If they were really a collection of writers looking to write books, they'd be arm deep in spoilers because they'd be talking about story structure and they'd be talking about how to get the most out of your villain arc and the most about how to get the best theme into your fight scene and the best complex construction of this and that. But they don't, because they don't give a shit about that. So somebody's got to give a shit about it, and that's where we come in. Because if you're trying to get this book published, you need to be able to talk about your book not in terms of, oh my God, I really like this scene. It's so great, you guys. But you need to talk about it in terms of, here's how this book could move or impact another human being. Here are the themes. Here are the guts of the story. Here's some view of me expressed through the story so that I can make it appealing to somebody else. You need to be able to talk about it as a whole thing. Because eventually, at some point, there's going to be a price tag slapped on this thing. And that price tag is not derived from the fact that, oh my God, I really gave the horse such like a cute name, you guys. You did not come up with a $3.99 price point because the horse has a funny name. You came up with a $3.99 price point because the whole sum total of the book is worth $3.99 in terms of sales. Once you are done drafting, once you are done writing the thing, the organization must transition into production of a different kind, into product-based movement. It's no longer about write the thing. Now it's about I wrote the thing, now what? Now what? You got to think about it as a finished book. So when we write the query, we have the full breadth of story available to us. When we write the synopsis, we can organize that information however we want. When we come up with a pitch, and we're going to come up with multiple pitches, we come up with different pitches to apply to a potentially different group of people every time. Here's a pitch if you want me to talk about it in terms of this. Here's a pitch if you want me to talk about it in terms of that. Here's a pitch if you want me to not talk about this. Here's a pitch if you want to not talk about that. All of those choices. That's why we don't only want one pitch. And we don't want 5 pitches all built around the same idea. You don't want pitches. You know, you can come up with 10 pitches. That's great. But if all 10 pitches all include some version of the phrase, a woman struggling in an uncertain world, your pitches are not distinct enough because you keep having to drive to the same point. We want some amount of independent, different, distinct pitches, which is why, and I know I have to do more of these on Mondays, we got to talk about how to build pitches and we got to talk about how to construct these things. And believe me, I will do those things on Mondays. But I want to make one point here as we start to fully wrap this thing up. If you're still writing, if you're still drafting, especially if you're drafting a first draft or a second draft, that is not the moment for you to think about a pitch. It's just not. It's sort of like being 10 years old and learning how to nail a sick skateboarding move. And then, you know, somebody coming up and going, hey, what do you think about variable rate mortgages? Because while that's a thing humans in a capitalist society may have to deal with in terms of being homed, It does not have a material point of relevance to the 10-year-old who just nailed a sick ollie. So if you're still drafting, especially in the early stages, why the hell are you sweating your pitch? Your story's not even done yet. It's just not. You're thinking like way about icing, and you're at the store buying flour, if we're using our cake example from an hour and a half ago. So what we want to do here is make sure we have a variety of pitches. Make sure we interpret a variety of those pitches and do a variety of potential query letters if we're going traditional publishing. Because as I said, the manuscript is written to the best of its ability, and I already told you those things that the traditional publishing establishment is looking for in terms of the story's architecture. And you've covered those to the best of your ability, and you've gotten help with that where you need to, and you've done everything you can think you can do. So that's just covered. So now it's time to talk about the book in an outreach way. How do I make this book appealing to you, the person who doesn't know as much about it as I do? That's where the pitch comes in. That's where the query comes in. That's where the synopsis comes in. That's where all the hoops get hooped and jumped through. If you're going self-publishing, we're skipping a few of these steps, but we're adding different steps instead, because you're still going to need to pitch. And we're still going to need to market the book in an outreach way to people who don't know anything about it. Only now it's going to be a bit more direct. And when I say direct, I mean there's no extra passage. I don't have to try and impress somebody who's then going to turn the book into a book. You're going straight from, I make this book, please buy it. So you still have to do all the same steps. In fact, you might have to work a little bit harder at it because you don't have that extra layer of input that comes in traditional publishing. I suggest getting that layer of input, from like a coach or something. Hi. But by and large, you still have to do it. So you're still going to have to write those pitches. You're still going to have to not necessarily write those queries, but be able to take that query idea and turn it into sales copy. And then you're going to have to do all the steps of publishing. You're going to need to craft that cover. You're going to need to make sure the book is in its absolute best shape. You're going to have to write the back blurb. You're going to have to package it all up, get it formatted, and make it distributable. Whether we're using a giant corporation or whether we're using it independently with a PDF or whether we're doing a million other things, that's all up to you, but the end result is still going to be the same. It's still going to be, you've got to take this book as a finished product and talk about it and organize how to talk about it in a way that you can do it from a couple different angles. Because your audience, however big they might be, whomever they might be, they're not all into this for the same reason. Some people come to this book because, I'm looking for something in the genre. Some people come to this because I'm looking for stuff you wrote because I like your work. Some people are coming to this because they like stories with this kind of character or this kind of world building or this kind of whatever. Everybody's got a different reason to come to the book, and you not necessarily need to anticipate all of them in terms of pitching and marketing and stuff, but you need to anticipate some of them. You got to at least cover 2 or 3 so you've got some sources of sales copy, some sources of marketability. And this all started, just to bring it all back full circle, because I'm looking at the clock. This all comes back to, how did I start telling the story? I started looking at character. I started looking at conflict. I started looking at world building. I started looking at how things intersect and interweave, because that clarity I had way back an hour and 45 minutes ago can be directly brought forward into the marketing, because that's the same kind of content the reader is looking for. What are the conflicts? Who are the characters? How do I engage with them? Where's the tension? What are the themes? All that stuff. And that's how we close this loop. That's how we package everything all up together. Make sense? Every stage of organizing your writing, every stage, whether we were drafting or whether we were outlining or whether we were revising or whether we were packaging for prep or whether we were putting it out the door, all these stages interweave and connect similar principles, just in different stages, in different directions, for an overall cumulative approach that leads us to a finished book. Questions, comments, concerns, panicked anxieties, sheer terror that your thing you're writing doesn't do any of this stuff? Anything like that? Confidence boosts desperately sought after? Anything? Ugh, I definitely need more tea. All right, otherwise, I think we're good. I think we're done here. All right, let's God, these things are awesome. I love doing this stuff. I love hanging out with you. I hope you enjoy these, because I always worry that no one's listening, and then the world shows up, and I feel great. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad you feel better after hearing that. That's wonderful. That's important to me. It is very important to me that all of you feel good about this. It's scary and it's big and there's a lot going on, but you are never without tools and you are never without an ability to get answers, right? No one is expecting you, and no one should expect you, except the hashtag writing community. Get help when you need help, and I'm happy to help. That's the whole point of this. The reason why I do this is to give you answers to stuff that I don't see anybody else talking about. It's fun for me. I love this. This makes me happy. So, thanks for being here, guys. I really appreciate it. Let's just do some quick housekeeping and we'll get on out of here. The next time I'm here in this very Twitch stream will be Wednesday, October the 13th, for the Writers' Chat. Side note, I'm considering renaming the Writers' Chat. To what? I don't know. But I'm thinking about it. It's on my mind. Because it tends to encompass a lot of things, not just writing. In fact, the act of writing itself has less and less been the focus. So I'm thinking about, and given the number of things I'm expanding into just overall as the writer next door, lots of new stuff's coming. We're still going to do them. It'll just have a different name. It'll still be on Wednesdays. It'll just have a different name. I don't know what that is yet. If you want to get in on that, if you want to join that discussion, the best thing, two things you can do. One, jump on the Discord. Or, well, to get to the Discord, you got to go to the Patreon. Patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate. That'll give you access to the Discord. Jump in the Discord, and by all means, completely and absolutely, join me in the discussion about what am I doing and what's going on, because there's a load of fun stuff coming, including but not limited to a whole pile of classes and webinars and new projects and things with a camera and video, in fact, and just loads more stuff. So it'll be fun. The next time I'm here into this microphone in this Twitch space is October the 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Writers' Chat. This is episode 346. So that'll be nice. Also, if you ever want the archive for all the other chats, it's on the Discord. So there's that too if you want extra hours. Eventually, most of them will make their way onto the YouTube channel. youtube.com/C/John Adamus, my name. But it's a slow process because for whatever reason, YouTube wants me to upload these things in real time some days. It is not uncommon for me to upload a 2-hour audio and for it to take 6 hours to upload. I don't know why. I wonder if there's a tech bro we can blame, or somehow this is I don't know, some makeup tutorials fault. I don't know, something. There's got to be a reason. But the next time I'll see you guys right here is on the 13th for the Writers' Chat. And then past that, it'll be next week. If you guys need anything, if you guys have any questions, any issues, any whatever, and you think of something and you're hearing this, if you're on YouTube and you've got questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'm more than happy to respond to them. I do read them all. If you have issues or you want to make suggestions, the two best places to make suggestions for, hey, here's something you could talk about on a Monday. Two best places. One, the Discord. And 2, you can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/awesome, AWESOME _ that's shift in the dash key, JOHN, awesome _John. Feel free to tweet me and leave all the suggestions you want. And if you need a coach, if you need editing, if you need help of any kind in helping you tell your story and make your stuff better and growing and all that good stuff, you can always jump on the website, writernextdoor.com. Other than that, I am, of course, always available and always around in some way, shape, or form. You just got to look for me. So, thank you for being here. It was delightful to see all of you. You've made my evening. You've rescued me and yet again saved my life. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you guys very, very soon. Oh, I have a note. If you are a Patreon person and you're hearing this, there is a possibility that, and I'll talk about this probably more on Wednesday, there's a possibility that this week's Patreon, which will be Candyman, by the way, the new Candyman, will be out on Saturday, not Friday. But I'll cover that on Wednesday. All right, guys. Have a good night. Be kind to each other. Be kind to yourself. Find something good and joyful in your life and celebrate it. Please have a glass of water. Take your meds. Get some rest. Do all the good things. Be kind. Be loving. And I will talk to you very, very soon.